Hey everybody, this is Patty Sliney, Handy Quilter National Educator, and we had a really great question come up on one of the Facebook groups for Pro-Stitcher, and the poster asked, how can I create an all-over edge-to-edge design where one row stitches left to right and then it drops down and stitches a second row right to left? So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm going to demonstrate this in Pro-Stitcher Premium because it has a feature called swap endpoints, swap start and endpoints. Unfortunately, Pro-Stitcher Lite does not have this function. So this is really something that you can only do in Pro-Stitcher Premium. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate that for you, just so you know. I'm sorry, Pro-Stitcher Lite users, you have to use Premium to do this. But let me go ahead and show you how you would do that. So first off, let's go find a design. You can see I've created an area. My area is 50 by 50, so lap quilt. I also put my quilting space in here for a reason, and I have a 24-inch machine, 24-inch throat space machine. So my area quilting space height is about 18 inches in height. So that's my safe quilting area within my machine's throat space. So I recommend you create a quilting space, and you just do that by going to the area tab. Here's your quilting space button, and you just take your machine and you place your needle up and you touch the top bar, come down about maybe half an inch, quarter of an inch, and touch your side clamps and then come in a couple of inches and set that first point by clicking on the quilting space button in your area tab toolbar ribbon. And then you take your machine and you move it all the way forward and you touch your front bar and then come back about quarter of an inch, half an inch, touch your side clamps, come in about 2 inches or so to the left, and set your second quilting space point. And that's going to show you where it's safe to stitch in your machine's throat space. So very important to know. And it's going to be very helpful in this little tutorial. So since we've done that and I know where it's safe to stitch, this is going to assure me that I can stitch out 2 rows, because remember, this is going to stitch out left to right, and then it's going to jump. It's going to have a jump, and then it's going to keep stitching right to left. So you need to be able to fit 2 rows in your throat space. So you have to mind your design element's height before you even get started. So let's go ahead and let's open a design that we have in Pro-Stitcher. I'm going to go ahead, and this is in our Pro-Stitcher Designs Continuous Line folder, and I'm just going to use the apple leaves. So we have apple leaves open, and you can see at the top of my screen and also over here in the right sidebar on the design tab, it tells me the height of this design is essentially 5 inches. So if I were to do 2 rows of this, that's going to be at least 10 inches that I have to be able to stitch out. A little bit more, because remember, we're going to have a little bit of a space between the 2 rows, a little bit of a gap. Not much, but maybe half an inch or so. So you have to keep that in mind. So I know with my 24-inch throat space machine, I could easily stitch out a 10-inch tall 2-row design. So I don't need to resize this. Now, if I did need to resize it, I would go ahead and go to Modify, Resize, turn my lock button on, and then I would resize it to whatever is going to be half of what will at least fit into my throat space. Rule of thumb for safe maximum design height. Take your machine's throat space and subtract 6 inches from it, and that is the maximum safe height of a design that you can stitch out in your throat space without hitting a bar. So if you had, say, an Amara 20 and you subtract 6 inches, 14 inches would be your maximum safe design height. So this design couldn't be any taller than 7 inches, or maybe 6.5 or 6. So that's where we do it. You resize it, and then you must baseline after you resize. That's probably the most important baseline step you'll do in all over edge to edge quilting. Why, you ask? Why do we need to baseline after we resize this individual design? Because if you don't, you have added a command to this single design element. It's a resize command. And now if you go and repeat this 10 times across and 12 times down, and you've got 120 of these, each one of them carries that resize command unnecessarily. It's not a clean, fresh design. It comes with extra modifications that you don't need, and you're sending a bunch of extra coding to Pro-Stitcher that's not necessary. And if you've ever had a buffer overflow, well, this can be one of the reasons why. So always resize, always baseline after you resize your individual design element prior to repeating it. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to just take my finger and I'm going to drag it over here. And I'm going to come off the Modify tab and go to the Repeat tab. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit because I want to kind of position this up at the top of my area. Back to Select, take my finger and I'm pulling it up so it's right at the top. Okay, and I'm having it hang over because I'm going to be cropping it, so I just want to make sure that I get enough repeats in here so I have some wiggle room and some readjustment room. So again, bunch of modifications I just did. I actually did a modify reposition, but I did it with my finger. So I don't want that command in this design element either. So I'm going to baseline it and that will get rid of it. And it freezes all modifications in place. And then it literally redigitizes this design just as though it were always digitized like this and on my screen this way. Clean, fresh design that we can now repeat without any extra commands that we would be dragging into all of this repeating. All right, let's repeat this horizontally. I'm going to repeat it several times. Maybe one more. Okay, so I have 11 repeats. I want you to see that number and remember that. And I'm happy with that, so I'm going to baseline that. Now, again, I want you to watch this field here. I have 11 repeats. Remember I told you when we baseline, it freezes modifications in place, and it literally redigitizes the design just as though it were always digitized this way. So watch what happens when I touch baseline and watch this number change. Now I have one giant long design with a start and an end point. It is no longer 11 separate designs that are connected. It is Pro-Stitcher sees this as one single design, just as though the digitizer had always digitized it this way. So all that repeat, those 11 repeat commands, gone. They're gone, and they're not being dragged into the all over edge to edge design. It keeps this design very simple, very clean, very easy for Pro-Stitcher to execute. Okay, so now I want to duplicate this row. I'm going to move my crosshair because I have loaded crosshairs on. So when I duplicate this, it's going to load it, the start point to my crosshairs. So we're going to go to the Edit tab. I'm going to click on Duplicate. Okay, so now I have a duplicated row and I'm going to touch Select and I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to manually kind of pull it up so I can kind of snug it in here. That's kind of a rough estimate. Let's zoom in so we can make it look really pretty because I want these two rows to be in relation to each other nicely. So I'm going to click Select again. Or if I don't want to use my finger, I could go to Modify, Reposition, and use my nudge arrows and kind of nudge it a little bit. I'm trying to make this distance the same as this distance, and that looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with that. So let's zoom back out by touching the refresh button here at the bottom of the screen. That's the little house icon at the very bottom. Okay, I like that. I think that looks pretty nice. So again, we are going to baseline. Again, it's taking out all of those edits and modifications. I did a whole bunch of them. They're all gone. And so now this is considered one single design without any edits or modifications. Nice, clean, simple design. All right, so we've got one more step before we combine the rows. So I need to swap my start and end points because I want the start point over here. That way, when this row stitches and gets to the end point, it's just going to jump right down to the start point of this row. So let's swap the end points. And again, we want a baseline. And then we want to combine these two rows. Now, if I go over here to my workspace tab, I can see that they are in correct stitching order. Your workspace tab here in the right sidebar, extremely helpful. It shows you everything that is chronologically on your workspace. So there's my area. That was the first thing I created. Here's my first design that I created. Here's the second design I created. Okay, so they're listed chronologically in your workspace, and this is really handy to use to select items on your workspace as opposed to trying to click, 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 or tap, tap, tap. It's much easier to select them over here. So don't forget about this workspace tab in the right sidebar. It's really helpful. All right, so I'm going to use my select none button down here, which is the X with the arrow pointing at it. I'm going to deselect everything. Because these are in correct stitching order, I don't need to use multi-select. I can actually just use select all, and it's going to select them in this order, which is the order I want. So if I click select all, it creates a temporary group here, and you can see there's my first design and my second design. So they're in the order I want them to stitch out. I'm happy with that. So again, baseline. Now I need to crop this. So we're going to go to modify crop, and we're going to crop outside. Then we're going to close the edges. And then we're going to baseline one final time for this design element. And then I recommend that you do a file, save, selected. And I don't have my flash drive plugged in. If I did, if I collapse my C drive, you would see D drive down here. And I would save it to my flash drive and name it like maybe Apple Leaves 2 Rows, just so I have it as a backup. So I always recommend don't save to your tablet C drive, always save to your flash drive, and name it whatever you want. Just click in here, clear the name, and you can say something like Apple Leaves 2 Rows, whatever makes sense to you, and then click save. I'm going to cancel because I don't have my flash drive in, but I've saved it in case I need to recreate it for some reason. You know, stuff happens, bad things can happen. So last step, we're going to repeat this. So let's go to the repeat tab and let's repeat it vertically. So I'm just going to, and you can see, now you can see very clearly, I can stitch out that first double row, no problem, but guess what I can't do? Not in my throat space anyway. I cannot stitch out 2 sets of these. I can only stitch out 1. So I'm going to move my crosshairs and kind of get them out of the way so you can see that a little more clearly. See, the second set here is outside of my quilting space. I would hit my front bar if I tried to stitch out the second half of this design. No problem, I can advance. Okay, now one thing I will do, I'm going to kind of reduce the vertical gap a little bit because this is farther apart than this. So I'm just going to hold my minus sign down until they look about the same. And if you really want to be sure, I would look at the distance here and then the distance here. And I might want to snug it up a wee bit more. I think that's probably good. Let's refresh. Okay, I'm going to baseline that, and then I think what I'll do, just so it's sort of even, because I'm going to have to crop this away, but I think what I would like to do, and this is personal preference, you don't have to do this, because remember, my area is out into the batting. So the tips of these leaves are going to get cut off anyway. They're getting stitched out in the batting. But if you want, you can center your design by going to Modify, Align, And if you click center here, that's going to center it both horizontally and vertically. So for you folks out there like myself who have some OCD tendencies, there you go. I'm happy I baselined it. You must baseline it before you crop. Anytime you add all your repeats, you must baseline prior to cropping. That's a second and critical baselining step. So I'm going to go ahead and crop outside, close my edges, do my final baseline. I'm very happy with this, and you can see if you look closely, it's kind of hard to see because the red stop point gets hidden. Let's turn off my area so you can see it. There's your stop point there. See? So you're going to have start and stop points. Turn my area back on, refresh. So it's going to stitch out left, and then it's going to have a jump. And then it's your choice. You can set your jumps to like 6 and just let it jump down, or 7, or however far apart this is. You can turn your grid on, and you could zoom in here, and you could try to figure out what the jump is. Again, you'd have to want to turn the area off so you could kind of see where it's stitching down. Oh, it's right, it's closed here. So, there's no jump, it actually stitches. So it's going to stitch, and then it's going to stitch down, and then it's going to start stitching right to left on the second row. So there's no jump involved in there. Let's turn off my grid, which I always recommend. Don't leave grid on when you're doing all over edge to edge work. It makes it really hard for you to see the really important things in your design. It's not necessary. You can't use it to align your design to. It's just a lot of background noise that you don't need. So keep your grid off when you're doing all over edge to edge. So totally happy with this. I've done my final baseline. This is where I do a file save, select it again, collapse my C drive, click on my D drive, and then I would probably call this repeat apple leaves 2 row edge to edge, and save it. That name makes sense to me. You can name it whatever you want. Okay, so when the stitch is out, as I mentioned, it is going to stitch left to right. Since we close the edges, there is no jump. It just stitches down and then proceeds to stitch right to left until it gets to this row end point, and then you get the long jump pause. Then we'd have to advance because I can't fit. Actually, I can fit. Since I moved this and recentered it, I can actually get that second set in, as you can see, because I recentered this, I moved it up a little bit, I can get this second set in. Can't do this one down here, no way. And I can tell you for sure if I try to, because this is only a partial row, there's no way I can do 2 sets. So I'll show you. If we drag it, let's say I move it up, and let's see, up, 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 up. And I'm looking for my second set, which is right about there. I'm going to drop it. Okay, so this is my third set, start row. It's going to go left to right, stitch down, right to left. Now the second set, I just can't quite stitch it in. See here? Let's zoom in. See how this is below my quilting space? I would hit a bar. I would hit a bar if I tried to do 2 sets. So as I suspected, even in my big machine's 24-inch throat space, I can only do 1 set. Left to right, right to left. I have to advance every time. But it does kind of slow things. It does speed things up because you're just stitching. You're not having to necessarily pull up threads and move your machine. So, and there's not really going to be an issue stitching right to left because this isn't a straight line. It is all over the place. So your machine will stitch right to left just fine. Not a problem. If you're concerned, slow down. Make sure you have a thread net on your cone. loosen up your quilt sandwich a bit, but this should be just fine stitching right to left. So I hope that's helpful. I hope you learned a little something about how to do an all over edge to edge with one row going left to right and a second row going right to left. Again, remember the critical thing is to make sure your original single design element isn't too tall to fit into your throat space twice, plus that little bit of extra gap. If so, you're going to have to resize your design element. So two of them stacked one on top of the other will fit into your machine's throat space. Always baseline after you resize, and you'll be good to go. So give this a try, practice it in simulation, and then give it a try on your machine. Happy quilting!